Hello everyone. On this channel, I often talk about how to improve your battling skills, building skills, and mindset in competitive Pokemon. One thing I've advised many times is to stay away from extreme playstyles like Hyper Offense and Stall, since they can hinder growth in the long run, as they effectively remove certain aspects of decision making from the game. I've also encouraged making middle ground plays, thinking from your opponent's perspective, and more. Like most forms of growth, the process of improving in competitive Pokemon is not linear. Incorporating new ways of thinking or new archetypes may lead to a lot of lost games or lost elo before it leads to success, but the journey is still worth it. But what if you said, screw that. I want to win this game right now. Forget growth. I want to win this particular game. If you're facing a less experienced player or a player around your level, the best way to win is just bringing a good team that you're comfortable with and playing your best. But what if you're facing a player that's significantly better than you are? Maybe you RNG'd your way to grand finals of a major tour, and now you're a 1400s player facing ABR. Or maybe you're just going to battle against that one friend that always seems to get the better of you. How should you approach this? Should you do the same thing and just bring a good team you've practiced and play to the best of your ability? Well, there's no silver bullet here. No way that's going to make it more likely than not that you win. You're still the worst player in this situation, so your odds to win are going to be under 50%. That being said, there are a lot of things you can do to maximize your odds. I've seen a lot of upsets in my time in the Pokemon community, and I'm going to share with you what I've seen work. I'll be using Scarlet and Violet OU for the examples, but these concepts and ideas can be applied to nearly all formats. Make sure to stick around till the end because I'll be listing the strategies in order of least likely to work to most likely to work. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Cheese them. Cheesy teams are a classic. Cheese typically means teams that are inconsistent, reliant upon matchup, and use some kind of gimmicky strategy to win. Much like in real life, some cheese is better than others. Something like Shell Smash Eject Pack Torkoal paired with Copycat Sylveon is absolutely terrible and really should never be used in a serious tournament. Mono choice teams are also really bad, as is Magic Room. On the other hand, something like Psy-Spam or Mono-type teams are a lot more likely to work. They're still not good or reliable strategies by any means, but they sometimes do have strong matchups into actual meta-viable teams. The benefit of using cheese teams is that your opponent probably won't prepare for it at all. The downside is that cheese teams often don't need to be specifically prepared for it, since your opponent is fairly likely to inadvertently prepare for it. Cheese teams are bad against a lot of meta teams, even if those meta teams aren't specifically designed to counter your cheese. That's what makes them cheese teams in the first place. If they didn't have a bad matchup spread against the normal metagame, they would just be viable strategies and not considered cheese. For example, imagine you're running a Psy-Spam like the one you see here. Poltegeist could sweep your opponent's entire team, or your opponent could have a Rillaboom and now your entire strategy is invalid. Still, if you cheese your opponent and end up getting a good matchup, the most seasoned tournament veteran can lose as easily as your grandma. Before I continue, please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment if you're enjoying. It helps out a lot. Number 2. Use Stall. This works on a similar principle as the cheese. Stall is a major matchup fish. I always say there's a stall for every team. Even if a team is prepared for most stall, they might not be ready for your stall. If you happen to have the right Pokemon that wall your opponent's breakers, you're all set. Be careful though. Stall is one of the easier archetypes to play, but if you're not familiar with it, it can be difficult. The game will likely be a long one, so you'll need to play well for many turns without making a single mistake. Mistakes with stall teams can be extremely costly. Losing one Pokemon normally means losing the game. If you end up with a good matchup, it won't be particularly difficult to avoid making mistakes, as the correct play will usually be fairly obvious, but you can't let yourself get tired or careless. I believe your odds of winning with a stall team are better than your odds of winning with a cheese team, which is why I placed it above cheese on this list. There's no player that's good enough to beat a well-played stall in a bad matchup. If you have the right Pokemon, the game is yours. Number 3. Use hyper offense. Once again, we're matchup fishing. If you have a sweeper that greatly threatens your opponent's team and you play reasonably well, you'll probably win. Top players are often ready for hyper offense though, so try not to use an extremely standard HO team. Use some unconventional but underrated sweepers to maximize your chances. The other thing about hyper offense is that it will lead to a short game. A long, drawn-out game that a stall team would produce gives your opponent more opportunities to outplay you. In a longer game, the better player is likely to find opportunities to gain ground. In an HO game, there won't be nearly as many turns for you to make a mistake. If you bring the right sweepers, end up with a solid matchup, and avoid making any significant blunders in the short game, you've got a good chance to win. Number 4. Make insanely bold or risky plays early on in the game or set. Going for reads or even plays that seem to make no sense at all early on in the set will likely shake your opponent and cause them to underestimate you. If you make unnecessarily aggressive or nonsensical plays early on, then reasonable choices later, your opponent may not realize that you're messing with them until it's too late. This is a solid strategy in general, unless you have an extremely dominant matchup and safe playing will almost certainly get you a win. If your opponent's first impression of you is that you make super aggressive or nonsensical plays, and they consider themselves to be the stronger player, they're likely going to play safely and conservatively, hoping you impale yourself on your own sword, so to speak, by making some terrible self-destructive move. You can take advantage of this. That's why I said to make insanely bold plays early in the set, not the entire set. Striking fear into your opponent immediately, followed by more reasonable and typical playing, works particularly well if your opponent considers themselves to be better than you. They'll likely assume you'll continue to play the way you did at the start of the game, recklessly. If you don't give them this, it levels the playing field a bit. Your superior opponent may normally have been inside your head, calling out what you're going to do every turn, but now they'll probably be too scared and take the safer route. And now, number 5. The best way to win against a stronger opponent is actually doing your best. Use teams that you feel comfortable with, whether that's hyper offense, balance, stall, or anything else. Use tested, solid teams and make the plays you think are optimal. Notice that this is exactly how you play against worse players or players that are around your level. Not only is this going to lead to the most growth and give you a solid game or set to reflect on, but in my opinion, it's actually the most likely to work. Usually, the better player will win. But in most of the upsets I've seen, it wasn't some cheesy team that got the win. It was the style that the underdog was most comfortable and practiced with. Now, to win, some things will still need to go your way. Maybe you'll get a good matchup or fortunate RNG. Maybe your opponent just came off a week-long bender. If the playing field was absolutely level, the better player would win 100% of the time. So don't feel bad if you get some lucky reads or some good RNG. Variety and chance is part of what makes Pokemon interesting, even if it is infuriating at times. Now, before I wrap up this video, I'd like to share a word of warning. Do not try to counter-team your opponent, at least not in the way most people understand it. If you scout your opponent's recent tournament replays, try to detect a pattern of what Pokemon or archetypes they bring, and try to design a team to counter those Pokemon or archetypes, you're doing it wrong. The best tournament teams are the teams that have found success in testing against a variety of team styles, typically on ladder. There's nothing wrong with bringing a team that matches up well against the styles your opponent typically brings, but make sure that you'd feel comfortable bringing that team against someone else. A good counter team is an already solid team that has a good matchup spread into your opponent's preferred styles. Creating a new team specifically designed to destroy your opponent almost never works. To summarize, the way to optimize your chances of winning is to scout your opponent, select a team that you're comfortable with that matches up reasonably well into their typical archetypes or choices, and then play to the best of your ability. For guides on how to improve your playing, check out my Battling Guides playlist. There's only one case where I'd legitimately recommend trying to cheese your opponent in a game, or switching up your play style to play HO or stall. And that's if the opponent you're facing is far, far, far above you. Like you're playing Soul Wind and you just started playing Pokemon a month ago. In that case, yes, going for some cheese team is the best option. But if you think you're so much worse than your opponent that cheesing them is your best shot, I'd ask you to reconsider. You're probably not as far beneath your opponent as you think. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.